All right. Good morning, folks, and welcome. I have started things up 2 minutes early, so I'm going to just chat for a couple minutes while we get things going. I have my Q&A panel popped out to the side here so I can see things as you go. GoToWebinar is a little special. Sometimes I drop things. Sometimes you see a chat window, sometimes you don't, but there is a Q&A window. If you just have comments, you can put comments in the Q&A window too, and I will see them when they pop up over there. I don't tend to use the chat window since a lot of people report not being able to find it depending on the GoToWebinar client that they are using. Sometimes it just doesn't show up. So it looks like we've got folks who are getting connected here, and I am going to start up soon. I see some folks who I saw last week at SQL Pass. Nice to see you, Hamish. And I don't know if I saw anyone else at Pass last week. It was a big conference week last week. So welcome back to all of you who traveled all the way to Seattle. And all right, time is about to roll over here. I am going to get started promptly because I know a lot of you have appointments after this, and I have to run and catch a plane after this. So with that, let's go ahead and get started. Welcome to Getting Executive Buy-in for DevOps, 3 top tips. My name is Kendra Little, and I am an evangelist at Redgate Software. And I'm also the founder of SQL Workbooks. I'm a Microsoft Most Valuable Professional, which means that I love to talk and present a lot, and I'm a Microsoft Certified Master in SQL Server. This webcast is brought to you by Redgate, and one of the things that I love on this slide about all of the cool things that Redgate has done so far this year is that we have had 582 product releases so far this year. And actually, this image is probably slightly out of date. I'm sure the number is higher than that now because I got this image a week or two ago. At Redgate, we make tools that enable people to do compliant database DevOps, and we do DevOps ourselves. We are constantly trying to improve our own practices, improving our software, and focusing on the customer. And I think that makes us a really interesting and compelling place to work because what we're constantly trying to do is to understand DevOps better, to do DevOps better, and to help other people do compliant database DevOps as well. Really, really fun to be part of that. In today's talk, we are going to go through a few different areas. Now, first up, I'm going to give away the top 3 tips. There's no surprise at the end. What we're going to do is we're going to go over these top 3 tips at the beginning, and then we're going to dig into them and look at what is the value of DevOps. We're going to look at why right now is a different and interesting time for some specific members of the C-suite, specifically CIOs and chief marketing officers as well, but we're really going to focus on CIOs today. And then we're going to step through a framework that we at Redgate believe is really helpful when focusing on implementing DevOps or improving a DevOps project. And in terms of speaking with leaders in the company, talking with other leaders, looking at and explaining and translating the value of DevOps through this framework, I think is very, very helpful because if we don't think about things in a certain structure, it can be easy to just overly simplify things and miss out on a lot of the value that's provided. So digging in, first up, what are these top 3 tips for getting executive buy-in? The first one is that executive support is really a powerful catalyst. Executive support alone is not going to cause us to be successful at DevOps. Similarly, we can't just buy DevOps in a box. We can't just buy a product, and as soon as we have the product, we have DevOps. We have to have a cultural change and a larger change happen in our company to get on the DevOps road and to continuously improve it. And executive support can be a huge catalyst for making that change happen. It isn't a guarantee, but it certainly helps. In terms of getting this support, speaking a language of business leaders can absolutely be helpful. Business leaders don't always think about things in terms of DevOps. They are not thinking about what build system do we want to use? How do we want to manage our deployment pipelines? They're thinking at a different level because they're thinking about business problems and business strategies. So part of what we're going to unpack in this presentation is, what are business leaders talking about these days? What are they thinking of? And how does that align with DevOps? So when we talk about the value of DevOps, how can we actually speak more of a language that aligns with this? How can we see the point of view more of the person that we're talking to? Also, we're going to dig into this CIO question a bit. What is going on with CTOs and CIOs, Chief Information Officers and Chief Technical Officers? And I've got a single question that I think can be really helpful when talking to a person in this role to help figure out where their perspective lies, what lens they are looking through specifically, which is very interesting right now. The third and final tip is that whenever we are talking with other leaders in our company, we really want to think about the company's strategy and our end users, our customers, and we want to think about how we can add value to that. So with that, let's go ahead and dig in and explore these a bit, make these make a bit more sense, because right now, starting out, they're pretty high level. And the first thing that I like to think about when talking about this is simply, okay, what is in general the value of DevOps? So stepping back a bit and not looking through these different lenses, just if we're going to sum up what is the value of DevOps, what do we say? We at Redgate love this quote. If you've been to other Redgate talks, you may have seen this quote before, but I think it is really, it's so far the best definition I've seen about what DevOps is. This is by Donovan Brown, who is a principal DevOps manager at Microsoft. And Donovan says that DevOps is the union of people, process, and products to enable continuous delivery of value to our end users. This is saying, DevOps is about continuously delivering value. It's not about continuously releasing changes. DevOps is about delivering value to our customers, the people who use our products. And DevOps isn't simply process. DevOps it requires people, it requires process, and it requires products, because it's not necessarily true that we should write all of the code for everything we're going to deliver. Sometimes choosing the right product that can help us, that instead of writing all our own software, can be the right decision. So DevOps is about harnessing technology and process and putting this together with the people who is using it to continuously deliver value to our end users. I think that's a really powerful definition. And this is the definition that I think is high level enough that we can look at what does this mean to specific people in different roles in our organization. David Linwood, he wrote a white paper with Redgate, and he has a co-author on the white paper, but he came up with the concept of these three lenses. The white paper is terrific. It's called The ROI of Database DevOps. It's available on the Redgate site. And I'm not going to present a ton of content from this white paper, so do read it if you're interested in learning more about this. But the concept that just immediately engaged me in the white paper was this concept of, let us look through these three lenses: the lens of the CEO, the lens of the CIO and CTO, and the lens of an IT or dev manager or a team leader. We're going to generalize at these three lenses. There are obviously more lenses we could create. These are, I think, the three that are most compelling for folks working in software development and working in IT in terms of learning how to affect change in the organization. Stepping back and oversimplifying a little bit, what do these three roles do? Well, CEOs have to be very forward-looking. Lots of executives have to be forward-looking, and more, even practitioners on the ground need to be forward-looking. But specifically for CEOs, they need to be looking at, where is the company going in 5 years? And how do we make it so that another company doesn't just completely rise up and disrupt our business model and take our customers away from us? How do we maximize the value of the company and make sure that we are headed in the right direction? Very big picture. CIOs and CTOs are more strategic. How do we harness the power of all our IT staff, all our information systems, and execute towards that goal while remaining under budget? Managers are also strategic, but a lot of what managers do, the closer managers get to the practitioner level where things are being executed, is figure out, how do I make my team successful aligned with the strategy for the IT department that is aligned with the goals for the company? Digging in a little bit to the CEO lens, what motivates CEOs? CEOs want to maximize value, and part of maximizing value is lowering cost. Cost is not simply what we spend. Our budget is definitely part of how we manage cost, but additionally, major failures can be very, very expensive. A 2015 report from IDC estimated that downtime costs for major companies on average $100,000 an hour. On average, $100,000 an hour. And this is going to vary for different companies, but there's revenue loss during the downtime itself, and then there's more extensive brand damage that can occur later from expensive failures. Maybe the failures are outages, maybe the failures are data breaches. Additionally, of course, maximizing value means higher revenue. Can we get new products to market faster than our competitors? These days, if we're making physical products, it can be quite easy for other companies to make copies of those products more cheaply. We need to constantly innovate, and we need to really focus on customer satisfaction to make our offer compelling. Gartner reported in 2017 that 47% of CEOs said to them when they did a survey that they are experiencing pressure from their board of directors to, quote, transform their digital business. CEOs do often report to a board of directors, and these boards are saying we have to get products to market fast. We have to stay ahead of our competition, or we are going to fall behind. And what the message that's coming from these board of directors follows this language. We're going to be digging into this language of transform their digital business and figuring out what that means. Further, there's information that CEOs have that say staying ahead of the competition, the best way to do this involves managing or writing our own software. And DevOps aligns with this very well. This is information from a paper by James Besson that is published at Boston University School of Law from 2017. And he did an economic study. He looked at this. This is referenced in the David Linwood white paper. There's a link to this. That's how I found it. And it talks about, Besson's paper talks about the fact that the way we are now, it's not that a young startup can just be on equal ground with a more established company. We are in a time where a young startup, if they use process and products and their people properly, if they are really very clever at this, in fact, they can have the advantage over a much more established company. This isn't just happening with Uber and Lyft revolutionizing the cab industry. This isn't just Postmates changing the nature of quick order food and delivery industry. This is happening across many and many industries. People in insurance, people in banking, people in healthcare. Leaders are looking around and saying, everyone's getting disrupted now, and this can happen to us. Making our people be able to strengthen our company against this disruption is a major concern as well. This quote on this slide is from a poll. The Stripe company, the payment company, did a poll with Harris Poll in 2018, and they published information on, it's called the developer coefficient. They polled more than 1,000 C-level executives, and they asked them, how much of a priority is it for you to increase the productivity of your developers? 96% of them said increasing productivity of developers is a high or a medium priority. If you are interested in starting up a DevOps project or improving your DevOps processes, this should be music to your ears, because DevOps is all about increasing the productivity of not just developers, but also everyone involved in helping the company be successful with technology, the whole IT stack as well. It's about removing manual tasks, and we'll step through 4 pillars of how we can increase productivity safely here. So this is a time when what CEOs want to do aligns really well with DevOps. We just need to make that link and speak that language a little better to help make that clear. Managers also are interested in things that align well with DevOps. I've skipped over the CIOs now. We're gonna head back to that shortly. For managers, if I'm a manager of a team of practitioners, I want my team to perform well, and I want them to be happy and healthy. Replacing people is expensive. A study I saw said replacing someone costs between 20% and 40% of that person's salary, depending on how long it takes to get up to speed. I also want to reduce, if I'm a manager, I don't want my team to be introducing defects all the time, whether they're writing changes, deploying changes, whatever they're doing. I don't want us being called on the carpet all the time. I want us to be able to smoothly effect change for the company. And when failures happen, I want us to be able to recover quickly and get right back on it so that my team is humming along and really is producing things that are helpful, not causing problems that take a long time to recover from. This is a simplified diagram. There's a terrific book called Accelerate. It's by Nicole Forsgren, Gene Kim, and Jez Humble. This diagram, there's a much more complex diagram on page 49. I just simplified out part of it that is attractive to managers. Over years of surveys, the Accelerate book covers 4 years of the State of DevOps report that they've put out. They found that practicing continuous delivery, continuously delivering releases, not necessarily value, but continuous delivery of changes does drive software delivery performance. And this is where we start getting into the values area here. If we are practicing continuous delivery, we do improve the performance of our software delivery, which means we are able to deploy more successfully with less downtime and less time to recover. And that this in turn drives organizational performance, meaning meeting the organizational objectives, aligning with the strategy, sometimes exceeding those objectives. In other words, respondents to the survey says, yes, continuous delivery does make us better at delivering software. And that, in fact, does meet our organizational goals. And this aligns really, really well with how a manager wants to run their teams. Now, next up, we are going to dig into the role that I skipped, the role in the middle, and talk about why it is a specifically critical time for CIOs. I've talked about CEOs, and I've talked about managers. The CIO role, the CIO lens, in David Linwood's term, is going through an interesting time. This slide lists the traditional concerns and goals of CIOs. And when I first started in IT, I worked in a software development company that we grew to several hundred people, but at the time when I started, we were maybe 150 people. It was a pretty shallow IT department. So I had a CTO, he wasn't a CIO, he was a CTO that I could talk to and who I got to know. And when I talked to him about just, what do we do in IT, he was really concerned with the throughput of the department. Like, can we execute on what we've been tasked with, and specifically what the other business units have tasked us with? Sales wants us to manage their CRM. The software development team, who was outside of us, they were a separate org in the company. They want us to build out these environments for them to do testing. QA wants their own environments, and we serve what the business asked. Our customer is these internal business units. He's also concerned with, how do I make sure that we have the right people doing the right jobs and they stay with us? This perspective is one that is changing in interesting ways for CIOs. CIOs now now that there is this pressure, we saw earlier, a lot of these boards of directors are saying, hey, we want you to transform your business digitally. What a digital transformation does at the business level, I'm not necessarily talking about DevOps theory now. Now what I'm doing is talking about what business leaders are saying when they're talking about digital transformations. Digital transformation means putting technology, whether it's technology that you make or a product that you've bought, but putting technology at the heart of the entire company and of all of the decisions that are made at different levels of the company. If we are putting technology at the heart of everything, the people who work in technology, the people who work in IT, the people who work as developers, now the customer is changing. So previously, if I'm a developer, the business wants me to do XYZ feature. Who is the business? Well, maybe the business is a product manager, maybe the business is a salesperson, maybe the business, but it's internal people. It's people inside the business units in our company. And if I was an IT person, similar, okay, this person needs this server, this person needs this database. But now it's much more about we are providing services to an end customer. Everyone in the business is aligning and working together as a team and focusing on this customer. That change in focus does really interesting things, not just to the CIO lens, but to everyone in IT. It effectively empowers them. The old vision of the CIO was essentially an order taker. Other parts of the business come to us and give us orders. We take those orders and we fulfill them. But now, the nature of digital transformation really elevates the CIO and the CTO to be equal peers and to have insights into the customer experience in ways that other people have. What people now in IT, what people in software development have access to is technology that can be harnessed to get more information about what the customer is doing, more information about what the customer really wants, and information that is critical to designing better products. Now, the concern is more about not just the throughput of our department in terms of producing what someone else in the business asked for, but what is the throughput of our department as we collaborate with everyone else in the business to generate the best ideas, the best products, the best innovation, and deliver it quickly for that external customer. This is an important shift, and it's one that has been around for a little while. Right? This didn't start yesterday. This started a while back, and it's really well underway. Back in 2016, Gartner said by 2020, 50% of the CIOs who have not transformed their capabilities essentially will no longer be CIOs. That prediction from 2016, things are moving along in full force, and this focus, this change has not slowed down. The focuses of a digital transformation are on delivering value to the customers. This information on this slide is from a Forrester podcast called What It Means. It's a terrific podcast. They have an episode called CIOs and the Future of IT. What they discussed in this about CIOs is that it's not just about bringing together development and operations. They covered more than this, but this was one of the big takeaways for me. And when we talk about DevOps, when we're like, oh, what is DevOps, right? I did have that definition earlier that it's bringing together people, process, and products to continuously deliver value to people. But when we think about who those people are, we're tempted to think it's developers and ops people, but it's way more than that. From the perspective of a digital transformation, and I would say this actually goes to the heart of DevOps, we need more people. We need people from marketing. We need people from sales. Marketing really focuses on who is my customer? What do they actually need? What do they express about what they want? How do those vary? Because they can differ a little bit. We need people from customer support who have insights as to what is actually going on with the customer experience. We do need to bring in different people across the business, much broader than dev and IT. It's not, though, that this bringing of people together doesn't necessarily mean that we aren't going to have DBAs anymore. We're still going to have database administrators. We're still going to have SAN administrators. We're still going to have developers, because specialization is still quite useful. There is a lot to learn, and we can't ask everyone to be everything. So there's still going to be specialization, but we have to break down a lot of the silos between these groups and work together. And DevOps is very useful in terms of its ability to do that. We do need to take the oversimplification of the name out of it a little bit. CIOs, when they're looking at how do I actually help speed up delivering value to our end users, this is a real problem for them because people are dissatisfied. Not only are customers demanding releases, but other parts of the business are realizing, hey, we need to deliver things faster. And in 2017, Forrester Research did a survey and found that 64% of respondents said, yeah, people within our organization are not happy with the slow time to release we have. We feel that we need to be doing it faster. And boy, is a lot of it slow. Only 23% of the enterprises they interviewed are releasing at least monthly. We can do a lot better than that. This is a huge opportunity right here. This is a huge opportunity for CIOs. This is a huge opportunity for people throughout the dev and software stack in terms of saying, this is a big opportunity for us to do better here. Investing in DevOps is attractive too because it allows us to set measures. We can look at what are outcomes that we want to reach, that we need all of these teams to get behind. We need to get global organizational outcomes like releasing value to the customers, not just releasing, just measuring releases doesn't necessarily work, right? Does a release add value? There is a qualitative judgment we have to have in there. But one example of how this can be useful. Traditionally, back when I started in that IT startup there, I worked first in a build operations job that was technically part of the IT group. This was before we had the word DevOps, but essentially what my job was automating the build of different environments for different groups and helping to release changes into production, being a bridge between dev and IT. And a bridge was absolutely needed because of the wall of confusion. We didn't measure global outcomes. We had separate outcomes that we wanted for each team. IT was tasked with maintaining the stability of the production environment. Our goal in IT was to make things available and perform well. However, development was measured on different goals. Development was measured on how much can you release quickly. There is absolutely friction between these. In fact, it builds a wall where development, okay, you've got to release, we've got to get this on a certain date, it's due, it's due, it's due. They throw a change over the wall and IT looks at the change and looks for any excuse to throw it back because we're tasked with stability and we know that this has been rushed to meet a date and we don't think they're concerned about stability on the other side of that wall. So we're like, well, what's the worst thing that can happen here? I see that you haven't mentioned X, Y, and Z that this might apply. Throw back over the wall or any excuse to go over. So having global outcomes means not doing this anymore. Having global outcomes means, hey, we are all going to be measured on our release tempo and on stability, both sides. This use of global outcomes can help bring people together. It is useful for CIOs to be able to report on the success of these global outcomes, but it's also very useful for them in terms of thinking strategically about how to get people to work together across the business. And there's a lot of information and frameworks available in DevOps to help make that happen. Let's dig in a little more and look through these 4 parts of the framework that we at Redgate see as essential to compliant database DevOps. The first one that we're going to look at is standardization. Again, when we see the words team-based development, we think of a development team, but it's actually more than this. When we think about implementing or improving a DevOps project, standardization is about getting code into version control and properly versioning our changes, being able to recreate what the environment was like at different points, being able to manage changes in a very controlled way. It also means making sure that we are using best practices when it comes to coding standards, that our environments are uniform and can be controlled and are properly documented. This is important when it comes to the database, and the database has been neglected for a long time. The State of DevOps report for 2018, this is by Nicole Forsgren, Jez Humble, and Gene Kim. This is the annual report they put out for 2018. And in 2018, they did something important that they hadn't done before. They asked respondents specifically about their database code and how they managed it. And they found that the teams that said, yes, we follow DevOps processes for our database code, we manage these in a similar way, maybe not in the exact same way, but in a similar way that we do to application changes. This was a predictor of which teams were successful at DevOps, which teams were high performers, and we'll dig into what high performers are at DevOps. It is important to include the database they found. For CIOs and for executives at this level, for high-level managers and CIOs in dev and IT, a productive cycle of this is really motivating. We hear from people in our organization that we should be releasing changes faster. Being able to do this even for database changes, being able to be better at continuous delivery, that's a big motivator. So we need to pull this database code in along with the app server code, even though for app code, it's a lot easier, right? I can much more easily roll back a change than I can, say, a schema change. Of course, there is some concern. How do I change our culture? How do I change our people and our processes to work well with this new system? We're used to working in a certain way, and it is absolutely difficult to change behavior, but we really do need to change behavior. At the end of this talk, right now, we're doing the next State of Database DevOps report. Redgate each year does a survey, and it's not just a survey of our existing customers. It's a survey of anyone who wants to respond, anybody who's interested in databases and wants to let us know about their experience. In the 2018 survey, we found that only 52% of database development uses version control. And I think of this as just basically having our pants on. So we've got 48% of places where we don't even have our pants on, where if we want to know what code is in the database, we have to restore a backup or look at production. And who knows if that code was created with the proper change releases. It's very difficult to map that to because we're not using version control or release processes that hold up to some analysis. What this all means is that with standardization, don't put off the database. When people start a DevOps project, they tend to say, oh, we're going to start with the lowest hanging fruit. The beginning of your project is when you've been talking to leadership throughout your company. You've been gaining this network of support and allies for this. And yes, you do want to achieve some success early on. I'm not saying that you don't. You don't necessarily want to start off with the very hardest thing, but while you've got that cover, while you're saying, hey, we're going to slow down for a while because we do need to put effort in standardization, you also want to grab some of the more difficult, complex items in there while you have the ability to do so and in your early stages of that and show, hey, we can tackle some of these difficult tasks and get through it. Otherwise, you're going to get to this point where you've done the lowest hanging fruit and now you're immersed in an area where you've got to do more tricky stuff. You've got to handle the database, but you also have a ton of test coverage that you have to write for the easy stuff you did. You also have a bunch of legacy code that wasn't in the easy stuff for the app servers that you've got to handle. Move some of the trickier stuff first. I would say the database should go early on as saying, hey, we've tackled this. We can really go with this. The most critical parts, our app code and our database code, we have a foundation there. I'm all about creating the foundation early on. Another key area for DevOps and another area to talk about what are the benefits that DevOps brings. We've talked about standardization and the foundation that it lays for being able to deliver change more quickly. The next area is automation. Removing manual tasks from database deployments is critical in terms of being able to move forward. Automation is what a lot of people talk about when they talk about DevOps. And automation means building ways to move changes through testing, through deployment, through evaluation with minimal manual work. continuous deployment and continuous delivery, they don't mean that we aren't testing anymore. There's still plenty of opportunities for testing along the way. We want to reduce the manual work needed as things go through the pipeline, and we want to automate as much as we can. From the CIO perspective, reducing manual work goes straight to that goal of increasing productivity for developers. Very, very attractive there. But do we have the right skills in our team to do this automation? Do we need help figuring out what are the best processes? What are the best tools to help us with this? Should we build them? Should we buy them? And how do we do this while actually producing changes that are good? Just automating things, if we're not delivering value, is a problem. We need automation to help us with that. And automation can help us with that in terms of if we can make deploying changes quick and easy, and if we can identify ways to deploy some things to only segments of our population of users, maybe through feature flags, maybe through other means, we can now experiment cheaply in terms of identifying, hey, if we do this, will people use it? Will people like it? It's companies like Domino's reported that they've found ways to say, for less than $1,000, to say, okay, I'm going to release a feature to a small segment of our population, and we'll see how well it works with them. Instead of doing a big business proposal and a big approval process, if I can cheaply experiment and find out how things work using my automation to help make it cheap, I can figure out what actually delights the customer. There may be some objections here, though. Why use automation if I could just hire more people? This automation seems like it's risky. Let's just add resources to our team. This is a famous thing from Fred Brooks. This has been a saying that's been around in IT for a while. Brooks's law says that when we have a late software project, if we just add more people to it, it actually becomes even later. And this is an interesting thing to think about when we think about how software is made and how teams of people work. This law is based upon the fact that when we join a project, it takes a while to get up to speed. Who does what? What's going on? What are we doing? Oh, I was working on X. Were you working on X too? We're all working on the same thing. There's overhead to communication. And the more people who get involved in a conversation, the higher the overhead goes. And the more likely we can be to have that game of telephone happens, where suddenly I realized that I thought I understood what you meant, but it turns out I'm working on something completely irrelevant because I misunderstood. When we have projects that are designed for a small number of people to do as well, adding in additional people can be very, very tricky, because how do I split one large task in two? It's not always apparent when that happens. DevOps is really relevant for this. When we think about how DevOps works, DevOps uses principles from Agile software development. It also uses principles from lean systems management. With DevOps, we are encouraged to manage our entire configuration and code. Part of standardization was making sure we understand where our environments differ. And part of that standardization is also documenting very consistently what our environments are and how they relate to one another. Key to automation, this is key to automation as well, because when we deploy to different environments, we need to have references that say, here is how it's actually configured. Well, if I have this done well, when I join a team, which in DevOps may happen frequently because teams may be created and disbanded when they are needed. When I join a team, I know, hey, I'm going to look at, I know the ways we manage code and configuration. I can look and see how everything is laid out. There's also visibility things we're going to talk about soon in terms of who's working on what and what's blocking progress that can be helpful. And that visibility into the flow of work, when I practice this on different teams in my org, I join a team, I know how do I look at the flow of work and how we are doing. Another principle of lean that can really come in useful is the decomposition of tasks. It sounds really fancy. There's an interesting DevOps practice that folks are encouraged to do as a training day called Elephant Carpaccio. Elephant Carpaccio is a training day where teams are built and teams are encouraged to take a project and to cut the project into as thin a slice of work as possible, and to even deeper than is immediately obvious, to figure out what is the smallest unit of work that I can do. If we rigorously practice decomposing our tasks, designing our projects that we can work in little bitty slices, if we have visibility into the flow of work, if we're doing configuration management code, bringing people into our team, there's less communication overhead, there's less ramp up time, and people are able to have tasks that don't overlap with other people. We have more chance to distribute the work. So DevOps does defy Brooks' law when you are a high-performing DevOps team. Just saying that you do DevOps, just having 4 people who do DevOps at your team, or just putting the name DevOps on things doesn't make this true. But and one thing, just to be real clear, this is taken from information on that book, Accelerate, by Nicole Forrest-Grin, Jez Humble, and Gene Kim, but they weren't talking about specifically late projects in this graph. They were talking about team sizes. So I'm comparing Brooks' law, which is about late projects, with information from surveys that were not specifically being asked about late projects. They were being asked about number of releases with measures that are on the next slide, high-performing DevOps teams for just general projects. But what they found is that large teams can be successful at DevOps. They are not necessarily saying that large teams are absolutely the way to go, but what they found was that medium performers, their productivity, and this is just people who are medium performers at DevOps, not the rock stars, but even scaling teams up to large sizes, productivity continues to increase. They found that high performers, people who are really good at DevOps, they can even scale farther, that productivity as you add more people can even go beyond a linear approval, and productivity can go higher than that as well. But if you try to do DevOps and you're really not getting it, adding more people will slow you down because of ramp up time, because of communication overhead, and limited divisibility of tasks. You're not practiced at Elephant Carpaccio. Well, what do we mean by high performer? What do we mean by low performer? This is defined in the Accelerate book. It's also defined in all the survey that these folks did. So DORA is officially the 2018 State of Database DevOps report. I took this from the 2018 report. When we talk about DevOps, we're talking about multiple things. We're talking about throughput and tempo. How often are we releasing? And how often or how long do things wait in the queue for release? These can be dramatically different, and both of them are important. I have absolutely worked in an organization where we release things into production all the time throughout the week, many changes a week. But our lead time for changes was terrible for database changes. I have been releasing changes throughout the week, and it's been a 3-month lead time for a database change. So when the database change finally gets deployed with a 3-month lead time, if there is any issue with that change, the developers haven't been working on it in 3 months. They have to actually go back and refresh. What was the point of this change? How did we do it? Why did we make certain choices? Which slows down, if there is a problem, it slows down the time to restore service. So if we are not good on certain measures in throughput and tempo, it is in fact going to hurt stability as well. We want not only to deploy value frequently, we want changes to not sit forever waiting for it, so that if there's an issue and we need to restore service, we all know what's in that change and we can figure out the best approach to take when fixing it. Change failure rate is also important. There's 4 different categorizations. In the 2018 report, they added a new elite categorization to this. And categorization is based upon a combination of how you do on the measures on the left. Dr. Forsgren does recommend, by the way, she did make the comment here that deployment frequency, if you're implementing these measures for your own organization, you do want to think about the quality of releases, because you don't want this to just be like a situation where you have a help desk measured on the number of tickets closed. You need to make sure that value was added in these releases. So it isn't just measuring or counting. Needs to be a judgment or a criteria on using these, but these can be global outcomes that we measure on. We do want to bring teams together using global measurements for this rather than separate them. Well, what about monitoring? We've looked so far at standardization, the value that can be seen for that from high-level executives. We've looked at automation. Monitoring is also important, and monitoring has long been seen as, we want to know if CPU is too high. We want to know if there's just an indicator of the system being down. But now, monitoring and visibility needs to get bigger, because really what we want to monitor is, what is the customer experience? Is the customer having a positive customer experience with the application? So poor performance is going to impact that. Outages are going to impact that. But also, sometimes changes we deploy can impact that. If we change a feature and customers don't like it, that is another aspect we want information on. We want perhaps to have monitoring systems that feed into, well, we absolutely want to have monitoring systems that feed into this, but we also want to think about, when we design applications, what are ways that we can get information about the user experience from this while respecting consumer privacy and related concerns. Ideally, we also, of course, want to predict when the experience is going to suffer and not just react. We want to email proactively if something bad is going on and say, we have a disruption, we're working to fix it. We don't want to wait until we get the angry tweets and the emails. CIOs do know, hey, there's a great value in being able to demonstrate that the customer experience is positive. We want to be able to show that we are warning early if that experience is going to be disrupted, and that our time to recovery is improving. Our time to recovery is getting better, and ideally that we are catching failures before they hit production as well. And here is that slide that PowerPoint spoiled for me. Failure is inevitable. This is in the Accelerate book, but it's a concept I've been familiar with, and I think everyone who works in IT and software has been familiar with for a long time. One of my favorite quotes is from Samuel Beckett, who says, "Try again, fail better." And I think that the art of developing and releasing software is about figuring out how to fail better, how to find problems before they hit production, how to recover from problems faster, because we are going to have failures. We are going to have difficulty. Some folks, and you may hear this objection from other leaders in your company, where they say, well, I like this whole idea of reducing manual work. I like this whole idea of standardizing our code, but I don't like this idea of releasing changes continuously. I think that we should hold all our changes in a pre-production environment. We should test them all together, and we should just release every couple of months or every month. This is called misguided performers in the State of Database DevOps reports. This category of folks, they release infrequently, but they do use a lot of DevOps processes. And this can be tempting, but what they found through the survey data of what actually happens in these experiences is that these folks have a long time to restore service. When problems happen after releases, it takes 1 to 6 months to get things right again, by which time you're about to dump another giant load of changes into production and go through it all again. Part of the benefits of DevOps is reducing that time to restore service. And releasing changes continuously, releasing changes frequently has been found to be, based on reports of people actually doing this, you're more likely to be a high performer if you are not holding those changes back for months and months and months. They also found that when it comes to visibility and monitoring, it's not just about limiting the work in progress. part of those lean principles is that this limiting work in progress is that practice of we're going to do elephant carpaccio and we're only going to have a certain amount of work in progress at a given time. We're going to work in small batches. But they found that just working in small batches itself is not a predictor of doing great at DevOps. We are more likely to be able to release value to the customers frequently and recover faster if we also display visibility into the flow of work and where the flow of work is being disrupted, and if monitoring data about the real customer experience is used by everyone on the team, developers, ops people, marketing people, sales people, customers. If everyone is looking at that data and thinking about it as we make decisions about what to do, that is a predictor of being a high performer. All right, our final area or category that can make us successful at continuous database deployment is protecting and preserving data. We are all familiar over the years with disaster recovery. We are familiar with the need of, oh, we need to restore a backup from 2 days ago because the customer wants to know what the data looks like then. But now we have new areas to think about. Increasing regulation, increasing data breaches, we have to protect sensitive data because no longer is our production environment the only target for bad actors. Now they know, hey, I'm going to go look in the dev environment and look for vulnerable data there that I can exploit. Parts of the environment that may not be as secured are very vulnerable. Additionally, we want the ability for people who need to set up a new environment to self-service it, to say, hey, spin this up for me, but spin it up for me with data that has been masked and protected that is less vulnerable than just the production data. For CIOs, the motivation of let's not have the company be down for a week, let's not have the company be down for an hour is very, very strong. But they also know we can't just do compliance once a year. We have to have ways to comply with all of these increasing regulations readily, and we need to shift them left into our process. This is from that Stripe poll, the developer coefficient. They asked those 1,000 C-level executives, how threatening are the following factors to your business? And you'll notice that these numbers do not add up to 100%. You could be concerned about more than one item. So of these concerns, these are items that were ranked as either somewhat threatening or very threatening, and people could mark off more than one. The one that got marked off the most is security and data breaches. That is the one that was by most people either somewhat or very threatening to the success of the business. And the second is increased regulation. Looking at this, I think it's amazing that disruption from the tech industry is actually third. It's not actually the scariest thing. It's the third scariest thing with developer talent coming right after that. But the two top ones are about protecting our data and doing it in a way that it aligns with regulation. This is for a very good reason. I went back when I had that DevOps job. My job was to, or it was a build operations job. We didn't even have the word DevOps at the time. But when I was in build operations, my job was to copy production data around to different environments. And that didn't always go so well, but we did need to have realistic data sets for performance testing reasons. And for, I mean, how could we tell if an index is going to be used if we don't have similar data? There were reasons that we did this, but it was deeply problematic. We cannot simply keep copying the exact production data around anymore. We need to remove sensitive data from that and either replace it with fake data that has similar distribution or confirm that it doesn't need to be in that copy. This is both for complying with those regulations, but it's also for customer trust, because more and more people are concerned that companies are not dealing with their data with respect. And this is becoming an increasing problem that we need to build into our solutions. And we at Redgate have been very cognizant of this and have built tools to help with this so that you can do things like, okay, I am going to request an environment be set up and masking will be applied to the data by default and it can be built quickly. Whatever you do, though, you want to think about in your DevOps process, as I am standardizing, as I am automating, as I am monitoring, what is the customer consent and the customer intent for this data? Am I aligned with that? Do we have steps where we are thinking about the regulations that we need to apply to? There's GDPR now in Europe. This affects even people in the United States who have European citizens as customers. There's the California Consumer and Privacy Act. We also have SOX, we have HIPAA. There is increasingly a lot to think about. The good news for us is there's increasingly a lot that can be very compelling to others in terms of improving our processes in this way, which I believe firmly does improve our job quality as well as improving value that we give to our customers. All right, let's step back a little bit. These 3 tips for getting executive buy-in. We've covered a lot of ground here, but bringing it together, executive support is a really powerful catalyst for these cultural changes, both in terms of saying, hey, I see that you're working on something difficult here. We're going to step back on our release tempo right now for a given time period, and then we're going to look at improving our release tempo afterwards, taking into effect these quality measures as well for making sure we aren't causing too many problems and that we can recover from them quickly. This is a powerful catalyst, and mapping the language of DevOps to the language of business transformation, of digital transformation, can be very helpful here. That single question for your CIO that I would ask. Say, hey, I watched this webinar the other day, and it was an interesting webinar. They suggested that I ask you this question, just in terms of learning more about our organization and our strategy. Kind of a funny question. It's simple. Who do you see as your customer? That question, that was suggested by that Forrester podcast. And I think it's a perfect, simple question. Frame it in the way of, hey, I listened to this podcast or I listened to this episode. Who do you see as your customer? That's the question they suggested I ask you. This can start up a real conversation with you about what is a digital transformation? What does it mean to them? How do they see the changes that are happening in terms of how companies are responding to disruption? Talking about this in that language and not just sticking within the language of DevOps, but moving into this corollary language can be really, really helpful and help you identify potential champions in other leaders in the company. Also, really paying attention to what are the high-level goals and strategy of your company. How are they evolving? That's super, super helpful in terms of having these conversations, because what you really want to talk about is delivering value to your customers. And that is really the heart of the strategy of your company. That's how you stay around for the next 5 years, for the next 10 years. That's how you don't get taken out by one of these disruptive customers that comes up, or by a huge data breach, or by regulations that it turns out you weren't following after all. So we do have something to ask of you. We have now launched for the month of November. We have the 2019 State of Database DevOps survey up. If you complete the survey, you can win a $250 Amazon gift card. And also you have the knowledge that you are helping to provide information to other people like you who are working with databases. So whether you are just starting on a DevOps journey, whether you're just thinking about a DevOps journey, or whether you're already on the way, we want to hear from you and we want to hear about these experiences. So head to redgate.com/DBD survey to take the survey before the end of November. Thanks so much for joining today. And I'm not seeing questions in the Q&A box here. So I'm gonna get the mouse out here and look over and try to check out if things have shown up in the chat box. I don't see a ton of questions or comments there. So if there isn't any other questions, I'm gonna just sort of chatter and wait a few minutes, because sometimes folks start typing them in late. We have a couple of minutes left. Thank you so much for attending today, folks. It's been really fun. I really am glad that we do this database DevOps survey. Its findings in terms of where are people in terms of practices, I think, is unique and very, very valuable. While the State of DevOps report did start asking questions about databases in 2018, we go much more in depth and I think provide something really, really useful to people in IT in general, as well as people who are interested in DevOps. Larry, thanks so much. Thanks so much for, Larry says, really terrific talk. Thanks, Kendra. Thanks so much, Larry. That's great to hear. Well, I do need to head out. I'm headed to the airport to head to Austin, Texas today. I live in Portland, Oregon, but I'm headed to Austin, Texas today, and then I'll be turning around soon and coming right back. And I look forward to doing more webcasts soon. I hope you guys have a great day and have a great week as well. Bye, folks. Thanks.